Hello, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us live. We are Cults to Consciousness. I'm Shelise Ansola. I'm here with my...
Hello. Hi, guys. How are you?
Yeah, and we are so excited to chat with you guys today about different spiritual experiences, how they are manipulated, and we brought on some experts from the FLDS and mainstream Mormonism as well. Thanks for joining us, guys. Growing up in polygamy, Sam and Melissa.
Hi.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, so happy that you're here. And the episode that we did with you just a few days ago is already doing so well. Everyone has so much to say about it. And so we thought we would dive just a little bit deeper, because I think one of the number one questions that people ask is, how can people still follow Warren Jeffs, this prophet of the FLDS church, when he is in prison? And we have actual proof, recorded proof of CSA that was going on down in Texas. It's really, really disturbing. We won't get into all of that today, but how can people still follow him? So I guess first we need to give... Sorry, I got ahead of myself. What is the FLDS? The Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, aka LDS, is the mainstream Mormon church, or Mormon. You guys would be considered the Fundamentalist Mormon group, the group that still wanted to practice polygamy after the LDS church said, okay, government said we can't, guys. And they're like, sure. And then they kept doing it on the side. So that is the group run by Warren Jeffs. If you guys have seen Keep Sweet, Pray, and Obey, there's another one. Prisoner of the Prophet talks about Warren Jeffs, because we just had on Brielle, her story. She was the 65th wife of Warren. But I feel like there's another documentary. Am I missing one?
There's so many going on.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's also, what's the evil
Oh my goodness.
prophet, or
Herbal LeBaron?
No, there's a different one too. There's
another
so many.
FLDS one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Prophets Pray.
Prophets
That's what it was.
Pray.
Prophets Pray.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, because the what is it? Daughters of the Cult just came out on Herbal LeBaron, which is another fundamentalist Mormon sect. There's so many things going on in Mormonism. It's wild, which is why we've been covering them for like an entire month.
Yeah. We are also covering the Daughters of the Cult as well on our channel this week, like starting this weekend.
Nice.
And so there's so many right now too.
I was just talking with someone that is actually still involved in the FLDS, and they were conveying to me that there are so many of these fundamentalist groups that a lot of us aren't even familiar with. There are just hundreds of them, a lot of them in Utah, Nevada, Arizona, but there's a lot of shoot-offs and break-offs from the LDS church.
Yeah, I remember reading Under the Banner of Heaven, the book that was turned into a TV series. Fantastic. Everyone who's watching, highly recommend. But I remember being kind of lost, because they were talking about all the different fundamentalist polygamist branches they were visiting. And I was like, wait, where? Who is that? There's another one over there too. And so, yeah, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
So
I remember, babe.
Yeah.
I remember when we were first dating and I didn't know half of what I know about Mormonism. And you were like, we need to watch this show. It's based off of this book, and I think this will be a good foundation for you knowing and understanding where I came from with Mormonism. And we're watching this show, and I'm looking at the Laffertys, and I'm like, you grew up in this, babe?
Well, no. I mean, yes, but no. Because for those who aren't familiar, Under the Banner of Heaven, it follows the Lafferty brothers who essentially blood atoned, somewhat murdered their sister-in-law and her child, because they weren't repenting, because they were living mainstream Mormonism, which wasn't good enough for them.
Right.
The blood atonement thing, like we get into that. That's a whole LeBaron thing that we talked about recently. That's that Daughters of the Cult. We just had on Anna. We're editing Celia to put her up. Two sisters who were involved, daughters of Herbal LeBaron. But all of that to say, that's the extreme side of Mormonism. I grew up in a very happy home, but it was psychologically controlling, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. So I feel like we're going all over the place, but we're here today to talk about how spiritual experiences can be manufactured or created within the FLDS specifically. And Sam, you grew up in the FLDS, so we'll get your opinions on that. And then Melissa, you can jump in anytime and talk about any spiritual experiences that you had in mainstream Mormonism, all of which they would say strengthen your testimony of the church, and how that can be misleading. Because I have to say first, like before we even start, spiritual experiences can absolutely happen. I'm not saying that they can't. I'm not saying they're all faked. I'm not saying they're all manufactured. I've had many of my own. Whether you believe in a certain God or not, I think they can be very real. What we're trying to point to today is that spiritual experiences do not have to mean that the thing that you are currently in is basically saying that that's true. That this spiritual experience confirms that this church that I'm currently in is true. Would you guys agree?
Yeah, I think you clarified perfectly there at the end that, like, we always say, like, you have to honor and respect people's spiritual experiences to a certain point, because that is their reality. What they're experiencing, what you're experiencing, that is 100% real, because your perception is your reality, right? And so it's more of the idea of how you interpret those experiences depends on your worldview. And you get your worldview a lot from based on your religion and the religion that you're raised in. And so it's not necessarily trying to like debunk them or say that they're not true. It's how you interpret is based on how you're raised, or how people tell you that's supposed to make you feel. Like, oh, I feel these feelings. And then someone says, oh, if you felt that, it means this. When other people start interpreting your spiritual experiences, telling you how you're supposed to feel and what that's supposed to mean to you, is when you can end up with those being manipulated or twisted.
Right.
Yeah.
So coming from the FLDS, and most people, and I've even had people tell me straight up, hey, just because you experienced something that was amazing in the FLDS does not mean it is a spiritual experience, because you're clearly following an evil man, and it's impossible to have spiritual experiences in such a place like that, right? And that is a little hurtful, I will say, because we all have what we considered very special spiritual experiences. And my parents, especially my mother, and father, both of them, have shared countless stories with me about spiritual experiences they've had, and protection that they've felt, and in the middle of a car accident, seeing an angel holding up the car to prevent it from hitting a power line pole that would have started the car on fire, and all of these different things, faith promoting stories, one after another that we would hear, and it just helped to build our faith in that so much. And that's not even to mention the stories and things that we would see from the leaders of the church. That was just within my own home. And something else to remember is, speaking for the FLDS, especially if you're raised in a belief like that, what you are familiar with makes perfect sense. There's no reason for you to doubt or wonder, oh, is this the truth? Or maybe there's something else out there, when you're fully believing in it, because it just makes perfect sense. It's the way you were raised. My parents, my older siblings are all experiencing all of these amazing things. It just makes sense. This has to be the truth.
Yeah. I think sometimes too, the idea of like monopolizing truth, or that only people within your group and your religion can feel true spiritual experiences, or the difference with Sam growing up in the FLDS and me growing up in the mainstream LDS, is that I was taught that we had the true priesthood. So like blessings and things like that, we could be healed. We had the true priesthood. So then when I met Sam, and he was talking about the power of healing in the FLDS, and I'm thinking, but you guys didn't have the real priesthood. Your leader was a pedophile. So therefore, I was like, almost when we first met, like invalidating his experience, because I had been taught that only those things could only happen in mine. And I would say one thing is, like, now we are much more open to recognizing that people can have spiritual experiences in any group, in any religion, and their experiences can be completely valid in how they're feeling.
Yeah. And outside religion too. You can have amazing spiritual experiences just sitting on a mountain, as my mom would always say, if she's still here in the chat. Hi, Mom. Hey, Mama Bear. Yeah. So I think just opening up our minds to the possibility of things not having to mean something. It can just be an experience. It doesn't have to mean something's true. It doesn't have to mean that you can never leave this church. There's a lot more to it. And we're going to get into on your channel right after this, guys. If you're watching, you will automatically be redirected to Growing Up in Polygamy's channel, where we're going to really dive into the specifics of the manipulative things that can occur to manufacture spiritual experiences as well as create them. But for this video, we want to talk about the FLDS specifically. Sam, why do people follow Warren Jeffs even though there's clear evidence that he's not a prophet?
Well, that's that's a great question. That's going to take a long answer to answer that question.
Yeah, I know.
And I'll try to narrow it down the best I can. Simply put, Warren Jeffs Warren Jeffs is not the first prophet to be put in prison.
Yeah.
And so FLDS look at it like that. They look at it like so many other apostles and prophets throughout history have been put in prison for things that the world said they did. And people will look at Joseph Smith, for example, and say, or the FLDS will look at Joseph Smith and say, see, he was also imprisoned because of his religion and what he believed and the outside world. And Satan was fighting against the church and therefore put him in prison. And they think the same about Warren Jeffs. And they don't believe most of the stuff that we know today and that we have video coverage and audio and all of that. They don't believe that's true. Even if they have seen and heard it, they will say fabricated. Someone fabricated this information. It's not true. He's a man of God. He would never do anything to hurt anyone else. It's straight from God what he is doing.
Yeah.
And so they fully believe that. And so that's a very quick and easy reason why they still believe that he is a prophet today, even though he's in prison.
Yeah. And I kind of wanted to also go off of when you said, like, it's clear to us, right? It's so clear to people on the outside. But there are people that we know. We had talked to one of Warren Jeffs' children, and they said, you know, they didn't even know the things that he was put in prison for, like even that it was child sexual abuse. They didn't even know that much information. So when there's so much information control,
yeah,
and what they are, even the amount of knowledge that they have is so limited most of the time that they're not even acknowledging things that are to us just out there online. Anybody can look up in 2 seconds. But if you have no access to the internet, you're not allowed to go and read anything. You're only hearing what you're told. The things that are so clear to us, they don't even have a base knowledge of, let alone the dissonance of being able to say, okay, that didn't happen, or that was okay because it was the prophet. Like most of the time, they don't even have to go to that point to like try to make sense of it because they don't even know it to begin with.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So let's get into then why people accepted him as the prophet and the leader in the first place. Because Jonathan had a great question on you guys' interview. He was asking, okay, what did Warren do to make people be like, well, yes, he's the guy?
Specifically because what we were talking about were these revelations that he's giving now from prison. And there's a whole video on it that we have, but if he goes and says can we say the mass suicide part? That's one of the revelations that he was giving. That's what it seemed like he was implying. And I was just thinking, if people actually go and jump off the cliff, what is it that is being done miracle wise that is getting these people to believe? So that's kind of how it all kind of started, this question about miracles. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I'll just kind of back up a ways, before Warren Jeffs became the prophet. I was this little boy, and Rulon Jeffs, Warren's dad, was the prophet. And I was believing in it 1,000%. I had no reason not to. And one of my older sisters married Rulon Jeffs, and she was, I believe, his 60th wife. And she was, I believe, around 19 years old, and he was about 80. So just to kind of sum up the story there. And anyway, all that being said, it was a privilege because she was marrying the prophet of God, and it was an honor and a privilege to do so if that was what God wanted. And to all of us in the family as well, at least for us younger children, we thought, wow, how amazing that she can be a part of this family, not really knowing what it all entailed to be married. And so we thought it was this amazing thing. But because she married him, we were welcomed into their home to come and visit on occasion. And whenever we did, I just remember, and to this day, it stuck with me because of the strong, powerful feelings that I had. At the moment I walked in those doors, I felt that I had died and gone to heaven. The overpowering spirit and feeling of peace and love and joy that I felt as I walked in those doors, I never wanted to leave. I thought that I had entered the celestial kingdom. I was just in awe of these people. And that is because of the way I was raised. It's what I believed. I believed that they were men of God 100%. Now knowing what was being done behind closed doors during that same time, it just makes me sick, and it confused my brain a lot when I first found out about these things. That how could I have those feelings? And Warren Jeffs, this supposed man of God, was molesting people, his own family, during that same time.
Yeah.
And anyway, but I had no reason not to believe because of the strong feelings that I had. And when I would shake their hand, oftentimes after meetings within the FLDS, we would stand up as a congregation and walk through the stand and shake the hands of all the speakers and the leaders. And whenever we would shake the hand of Rulin and then Warren Jeffs, we felt that and it wasn't just me, it was all of us, we would talk about it. We felt that they could see through our souls, and they knew everything about us. And we didn't dare lie about anything because we believed that God would just tell them the truth and they would know. And so it was a very, very strong feeling. And we just knew. And I think that a lot of us had those same feelings of love and peace and joy when we entered into their home.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
kind of
So,
going,
go
oh,
ahead.
sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
Oh, I was just going to say that along with just in this example, like obviously he'd been taught his entire life that that's how you should feel in the presence of the prophet, right? But even beyond that, the feeling like they're going to look into your soul, there were times where as he got older that they would get a phone call and just be told like they know what you did. Do you want to kind of share a little bit of that?
So
like,
there was
we know what you did.
Yeah. And they would use these tactics to make us believe that they knew all, and that they would convince their followers to tell them things that they had no idea that these people had done, but they felt guilty about it. And so they would tell them. For example, me and a lot of my brothers, one day we get a phone call from Father, and he says, the bishop, who was at the time Willie Jessup. So this was before Lyle Jeffs became the bishop. Anyway, the bishop at the time says, I want to speak to all of your boys, all of your adult boys. And so we all met at the office, and we got a phone call, and Father was kind of confused. He was like, why does he want to talk to you boys? I don't know. I guess we weren't all adults. We were teenagers or adults. And so we get a call from the bishop, and he says, the Lord has told us that some of you boys have been sinning, and we need to know what it is that you have done. And we were frightened out of our minds. We're like, oh my gosh, God saw that we did this. And we were looking at each other. What did we do? What did we do? And then they named off a few things like, have you watched any movies? Have you listened to any Gentile music? And named off a few things. And some of us said yes. And there were multiple other things on the list. You know, they were sure to catch something that we had done.
Sam's Hillary Duff obsession at that time.
Yeah.
He's like, they know I was listening to Hillary Duff. I'm screwed.
It's true. It's true. I had seen every movie that she ever played in, and I had listened to every song she ever sung.
Calling you out, babe. Sorry.
And thank you, babe. Thanks for that. Now I'm embarrassed. And so anyway, so we all looked at each other and said yes. And they said, which one of these sins have you done? And we told them, you know, we watched the movie, we listened to music, and some of the sins they were asking about, I didn't even know what they were. I was just like, I don't think I did that. I wasn't even sure what they were saying. And anyway, but of course there was something on the list that all of us had done. And then because of that, we were so afraid to ever do anything wrong, because that was just an experience that told us all God's watching and telling his prophet what we're doing.
And it's like confirming, right? It's confirming the feeling when you're shaking their hands and you're like, they're looking into my soul. And then they're calling you up and saying, we know what you did. Those are those opportunities for them to like buckle down and confirm, because now you're like, that feeling that I felt, now I know is right, because they called me out on it later.
Right. And then kind of stepping away from the leaders of the church and going into my own home. Some reasons why I felt once again that I was in the right and that this was the true church of God was some of the spiritual experiences that I had in the home, and was told that my father held a very special kind of priesthood and that he had the power and the keys to bestow blessings, to cast out devils, to do all of these things, to heal the sick, and many, many, many things he had the power to do because of his priesthood. And of course, we were told, like Melissa said, that we were the one and true church and the only church that had that power on the earth because we had the priesthood lineage straight from us back to Joseph Smith and then beyond that. And so an experience that I had, which I'll just share because it was such a faith promoting experience for me, as I would say I was probably about, I would have been older, maybe about 11 years old at the time. I got so sick one day to the point that I actually couldn't even move. And I had people carry me to my bed. I had people bring me food. I was just sweating and we didn't really rush to the hospital in the FLDS. So I don't know what was going on to this day, but I was very, very sick. And I remember my mother sitting by the bedside almost all day, just rubbing my feet, wiping the sweat off my body and trying to help me. And I just remember how just awful I felt in that moment. And I don't remember if someone went to Father and asked for this or if he just felt that it needed to be done. But after a couple of days of feeling this way, he said that he was going to rededicate the home. And for you that don't know what that means, basically, they would use the priesthood power that they felt that they had to dedicate their home so that no evil spirits could dwell there and nothing.
Right.
No evil.
We did that too. I forgot.
Yes.
Yep, we did that too. Yep, in the mainstream LDS.
So something different though between the FLDS and mainstream LDS, which I noticed right away after I left, was that the FLDS would rededicate their home pretty frequently. If ever they felt like something was off or something came into the home that wasn't welcome or that there was a bad feeling in the home, they would rededicate it and cast out the evil. And that wasn't done in the mainstream LDS church.
No, I think you only dedicated each of our homes once, because Sam would dedicate when we first got married.
And we were in the mainstream. LDS,
Sam would dedicate every new home that we went to.
Right.
Couple. But I think only ever once.
But in the FLDS, we would also dedicate our cars, just FYI. So that was something extra, just to they did it for the protection from evil, so that as they were driving to work, they would be protected and that kind of thing.
But when he would play Hillary Duff in the car, then his brothers would get mad and rededicate the car again.
That's true. They were very upset. They had to go through the
or Taylor Swift. I mean, you can take your pick. But
did you listen to Miley Cyrus?
Maybe. Yes. So anyway, any of those, or Tim McGraw. I did listen to a couple guy singers too. Come on, guys, give me a break. So any of these singers, though, if we listened to them in the car, it would make our older brothers very upset because, yes, they would have to rededicate their car because they thought that welcomed evil into the car or truck. And anyway, so back to my story. As a young boy, I was very sick. My father said, everyone needs to come up to the living room. We're going to dedicate the home. And I couldn't walk, like I had mentioned. So a couple of my brothers picked me up and carried me up and sat me in a big chair in the living room. And it's crazy. It almost brings tears to my eyes just thinking about it because it was just such a real experience for me. I sat there and watched my father stand up and give this blessing. And oh my gosh, sorry.
That's okay.
And oh man. And just stood right before me, and my mother was holding my hand, and he said, by the authority invested in me, and he just cast out all evil and said, you're not welcome here. Get out of my house. And I immediately, as he said amen, I stood up and walked out and mingled with the family, and I was perfectly fine, 100% fine. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense unless you believe in some kind of higher power or that I was so confident in my father and so faithful in my belief that I knew that once he said those words, I'd be fine. I knew. I didn't doubt it. I was convinced. And so when he said, "You're healed," I said, "Okay." And I stood up and I walked and I was fine. So just another experience that happened to me as a young boy that made it so hard to ever doubt what I thought I knew was the only truth.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And that does sound incredibly powerful. And I think that all four of us are on the same page as far as we're not saying it was or was not a higher power. Like, we don't really know, but we're open to all these different interpretations and perspectives. Right? When you say
Yeah,
same.
of course. Yeah.
So I think what this illustrates, though, is when you're in a high control group already and you have an experience like that, it just makes you deeper in it. And like you said, it's impossible. Well, it feels impossible to leave because most people think that when they leave a high demand group, they have to leave their experiences behind, which I don't think that's true at all. In my case, I remember I had so many spiritual experiences in the Mormon church, so many. My mom gave me a blessing once, and that was like not normal because my dad was out of town. I was sick. I had tryouts for, it wasn't as dramatic or awesome as yours, but I had tryouts for the dance team for the very first time for high school the next morning at like 4 a.m. And I was so excited, but I was so sick. And my mom's like, "I'll give you a blessing." Like, love her for that. If she's still in the chat, hey, Mom, good job. But I remember the next day I was so much better. And I was like, wow, the church is true.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have anything to do with that, at least in my opinion. And so when I left, I had to really sit down with myself and go, okay, let me list all of these experiences in my mind that I thought were testimony builders, that I thought were faith promoters, that I thought confirmed the one true church on the planet. And I just realized that it had nothing to do with that. It just happened to be the time and place of which it happened. It just because it happens in church building doesn't mean that that's the true church. You know what I mean? And so I think there's a lot that can be said for these spiritual experiences, and they can change your life, and that's amazing. We can't really explain them or know where they came from, but it's okay to validate that experience and invalidate the cult that you're leaving.
Right.
Yeah, I think one thing, like, I always feel like frustrated when people are, in my case, again, mainstream LDS, and I had spiritual experiences as well. And I remember when we were going through our faith transition, and we would have family members that would be like, just remember, you hear that word a lot.
Right.
Remember, remember from the
Right.
scriptures, right? Like 3 remembers. It's always at least 3. Remember. And it's like, if you would just remember your spiritual experiences, it will keep you in, it'll keep your faith going. Just remember.
Yes.
And I get that does work often, but I also, as I was transitioning out of the mainstream LDS church, I also was like so frustrated. I'm like, why do you think that I forgot them?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean that I forgot my spiritual experiences. It doesn't mean that, like, when Sam talks about this, that he's not going to feel those same emotions. Like, and I can feel his emotion. It makes me cry. Like, it doesn't negate our spiritual experiences, because certain knowledge or experiences moving forward can make us look backward and say, I now think that this might have been what it was. When Sam and I were dating, before we started dating, I had been like going to church, not going to church. I had shelf items that had been struggling back and forth for a few years of things that I believed were true or not true in the church. And I felt impressed that I needed to move back to St. George. I was living in northern Utah, working on my career. Things were fantastic. I moved back and I hadn't been to church in a while. And I woke up and I felt like I need to go to church today. And so I went at the time and the place that the church app told me, and I walked in and it wasn't the right place. It wasn't the right time. And I was sitting in the back mad, right? When I saw Sam, who I hadn't seen in 5 years, and I went and tapped on his shoulder. And, a couple weeks later, we are dating. And then 6 weeks later, we're engaged. And I remember
gosh.
Yeah. And that whole whirlwind of like, oh my gosh, like I was led back to church. And to me, that was like a faith promotion of, I listened to the Spirit. I went to the right place. I remet the love of my life. Like I met him and got to date him and marry him and all these things. And I remember, at that point, I still had questions of whether or not I believed in priesthood or the temples or this or that. And I remember one time he was the elders quorum president in the young single adults ward, which is like the highest calling you can get as a young man in that ward. For those of you who aren't aware, like the bishopric's always older men from family wards. But as far as like leadership goes, he was the top of it. And, girls that were in college, like people would call him to give blessings. And one time we were on a date and somebody called and they needed a blessing because they were away from their family. And so he was the go-to guy. And so we went, and I just remember like writing in my journal that I felt more like I had more spiritual experiences while I was dating and engaged to Sam than what I had the rest of my life combined.
Whoa.
And, and I look back on that, and whatever you want to call it, again, I don't look back and now think, okay, that doesn't make the church true in my mind because there are other things. But man, the power of love, of falling in love, of watching the man that I love serve people and care about people and being the best man that he knew how to be in the best way that he knew possible. All of those things are like a perfect culmination of experiences. And I think just being the best person you know how to be in whatever group it is. Your father giving that blessing, that was, in my mind, an example of him being the best priesthood holder, good father, good husband, all of those things, the culmination of the best that he could literally offer to the world.
Right.
And miracles happen from that, And so I don't know. It's just, I'm kind of off on a tangent now, but
that was good.
I have said this before, but I think that sometimes people can also confuse spiritual experiences with love. And sometimes, when, like you said, that when people are sharing this amount of love for each other and you feel that, and you get this feeling that you've been taught your whole life, oh, that's the spirit. Sometimes it's easy to confuse that, whether it's within your own family or dating or whatever it is. But sometimes I've found, at least I believe personally, that sometimes those two can be confused.
Yeah. And I mean, even
or it's the same thing.
Or it's the same thing. I was just going to say, and people that are still in the church are family members. If that's what you believe, that the spirit is love, then you're going to feel those same feelings. And we might call it love and other people might call it the spirit. And that's okay. And feeling love and having those type of experiences, like you said, are completely valid. And it's when people try to take loving experiences and try to use it for their own gain or use it in a way to harm others. That's, I don't want to speak for you too, Shelise, but I feel like you said earlier, like, I feel like we're on the same page here, that it's not the experience itself. It's when people try to take your experiences and use it, twist it into a harmful way, that those are the harmful ones. But then there are also so many experiences that are just validating and filled with love and filled with kindness. And you can really just, expand and grow from those.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's hard to separate, especially when you are so invested in a specific group. Like you were talking about, Sam, in the beginning, how when you were a child, why would you think it was something else? There's no reason for you to question your perspective. That's just your reality. And so that's really why we're talking about this, is not to invalidate anyone's experience, but to get them to look at it from a different perspective, to help them understand that they don't have to be enmeshed, that they can be separate things, and that's okay. And if one thing falls apart, the other thing can still be true and can still be beautiful and can still be memorable. So we have like 10 minutes before we go to your channel. So I'm going to go to some super chats over here.
All right.
Yeah.
Tracy, I think Tracy said this before we even went live. It's so awesome. So glad to see you guys. Wow, you guys are spoiling us. So much love to all. Thank you, Tracy.
Thanks,
Thank you, Tracy. We love you.
Then we have Derek popping in, most valuable production. So much love to everyone. Thank you so much. He always comes in our chats and supports.
Thank you.
It's very, very kind. We have Ali. I watched Daughters after seeing Little Barons on your show. Good to see Sam and Melissa. Found you all guys via Amanda Ray. Awesome.
Oh, we love Amanda.
Amanda's so awesome.
She's so fun.
We also have one more video coming up with Celia from the the LeBaron daughters as well.
Yes.
So stay
Oh,
tuned. Probably just after this weekend, we're going to post that one.
Yeah.
awesome.
And then here is another one. Gayest Husky. That's awesome. For miracles, I ask, what is more likely? Has reality been suspended in my favor? All little kids in the background. And
Sorry, I
we're
know they're being really loud.
It's okay. And speaking of kids, and were thousands of kids, dying kids, ignored by God for me, or am I mistaken? Yeah, that's a tricky one. And I mean, we could go off on a tangent for hours, I'm sure, on this, where people say thank God for something, which I totally get and I totally understand. This is not to invalidate. But what bothers me is on the other end of that is, was God ignoring all of the people suffering? Or like, you know what I mean? Or like when
Oh,
we used to pray
100%.
to find our car keys and we found our keys, we're like, oh, thank you, God. God's looking out for me. Does God really care about your car keys? Probably not. I like, it's just stuff
Yeah.
like that that irks me. But anyways, I don't want to spend too much time on that.
So can I share an irk for me
Yes,
too?
please,
In
please.
addition to this one, I mean, yes, the car key one, I agree, where he taught like, to pray over every little thing. And I'm like, God has more important things to do. I personally believe. But another one that's really hard for me, especially now, and it more makes me sad than anything, is like being taught that God is giving us trials and like giving hard things to us. Like this idea that like God blesses us, but then on the opposite side of that, that must mean that God is giving us all the hard things. And like I've known people that have like gotten cancer and they're like, I'm so, grateful that God gave me this trial so that I could work through it. And I was like, oh my gosh, like it breaks my heart to think like if you believe in a loving God, the idea that he's going to give things
Hurt
to
you on
you,
purpose.
hurt you on purpose. Yeah, hurt you on purpose. And especially now that we're parents, that one like doesn't hold water for me at all. I'm like, listen, just because if you believe God can help you through hard things, that's totally different than like he's giving you cancer or he's, he let this horrible thing happen to you that should never happen to you. Like as a parent, you wouldn't let something horrible happen to your child unless, you know what I mean? Like it's like you can help them
Yeah.
through bad things, but to say that it's like
Yeah, to
given
like
by
take them
God.
over to the stove and be like, here, put your hand on this. Now you know not to touch it. Aren't you glad that I taught you that
Right.
lesson?
No, but when
Right.
things accidentally happen and a kid touches the stove, it's your job as a parent to like help them through that hard thing, right?
Yeah.
So in my
Yeah.
mind, that one always makes me sad too when people feel like God did things to them, like bad things somehow for their good.
Yeah, or because they were unworthy and they weren't doing
Oh,
what they were
that's even
supposed to, and it was a
Mhm.
punishment. That's another
Yeah,
thing.
that's even more
Oh
heartbreaking.
yes.
Oh man. Okay, I'm gonna keep going because we can talk about this forever.
Yep.
Love you, Fine Purple. Thanks so much, Marie. Or Mary Tate. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce it. Okay, and then we have Nix Hoskins. Do you know if anyone has speculated on Warren's mental health? Some of his behaviors reminded me of psychosis, not to excuse his crimes in any way. Great question.
Yeah.
Yes, there actually have been people within his own family actually that have questioned his health and what's going on, because some of the revelations and some of the things that he is sending from prison at this point seem so far-fetched and so crazy that they have been concerned. We've heard and talked to some people really close to him about his mental state at this point.
At this point, he
Mhm.
denies it. So the source that we had, this child said that they believed it so much that they actually like went to the prison and they were like, what are you giving my father? And the prison was like, nothing. And Warren actually found out and chastised this child and was like, how dare you think that I'm on anything? I don't take any drugs. And then now his latest revelations from this last year, he's been like signing his signature on the side and sending like handwritten portions and like basically notarizing it himself so that
Yeah.
people will believe that it's actually from him. So he claims that he's in his right mind. His family's worried, but there's no proof as to what else could be going on other than it being his own psychosis, if that
Right.
makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, he's got to stop and think for a second. If people think I'm crazy, what's going on here? If I have to notarize my own letters for them to believe it.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's
Ugh.
definitely that thought out there, and I think that he's getting worse over time. I think it's
Mm.
just getting worse and worse.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. I mean, I'm sure a prison environment would do that to anybody.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I can only imagine. Okay, Deborah, so excited to make a live. Absolutely love this channel. Thank you so much, Deborah, for your
Thank
generous
you.
super chat. That means a lot. It's a nice little way to support us, guys. It's not mandatory, but it's very, very kind. And then we have Molly, thank you so much. No words, but just
Well, thank you so
donate. We
much.
appreciate it. Thank you, Molly.
Yeah.
Okay, we have 5 minutes. Are there any questions that you've been seeing, Love, that you want to put up?
Yes. Well, I want to address this from our last video. Thank you for bringing up the missing children in the last video. As an Idahoan right next door, I'm constantly hearing it and don't know how to help. So what is the best way to help?
Oh, that's a great question that a lot of people have, and really, there's a lot we could talk about here. But what it really comes down to is trying to be there for them in any way
Kindness.
possible. So I'll just use an example. When I left the FLDS church, one of the main reasons that I ended up leaving was because I found out that people outside of the church were good people. They were happy, they were helping, they were loving. And I didn't think that was the case because of the way I was brought up in the church. And the church leaders would tell us that the outside world are all wicked and evil and Satan is controlling them. So it's showing that love and kindness to those around you from within the FLDS is definitely the best way I can think how at this point. Beyond that, if you see something that seems very suspicious, to contact the law enforcement.
Yeah, definitely. And if you see any of the children with pictures, right now law enforcement is just having a hard time tracking them down since they're all considered runaways at the moment. And so if anybody does see any of those pictures, then definitely to reach out to law enforcement.
Yeah. Awesome. And they can also contact Holding Out Help, right? Are
Yes.
they someone who helps with that?
Yes.
Yeah, they know Holding Out Help. Tanya is great at connecting people and resources. So, and she's works with all the mothers who are missing children. And so she has a close relationship with all the mothers and would be able to help direct you in the right way.
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Apostate Alex in the chat. What's up? our fun Scientologist friend from the UK. He's been on the
All
channel a
right.
couple times.
Ex-Scientologist.
Oh,
friend.
sorry. Thanks. I'm sure he would have been in the chat being like, Shelise, really?
We got that with the apostate.
Yeah, right. Thanks. Found their channel the other day. How funny. Small World is going to text you. Yes, we love
Oh,
these guys.
Oh, awesome.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you.
Well, I think we have to jump over, but I do like this comment here. Whatever you believe, these discussions feed my soul. And that's what we're trying to do
Oh,
with our
thanks,
channels.
Yay. Thank
That's
you.
what we're hoping for.
Oh, wow. Molly gave another 10.
Wow.
Thank you so much,
Aw,
Molly.
thanks,
That's
Molly.
so kind. Yeah, so guys, if you're in the chat right now and you're interested in diving deeper into ways that cults can manipulate or manufacture spiritual experiences, we are going to be talking about that over there. So just stay tuned. When the chat ends, you will be automatically redirected to Growing Up in Polygamy. And whether or not you're coming, if you haven't already, go subscribe to their channel. They got some great stuff over there. They're doing lots of reaction videos, talk about the FLDS specifically, Warren Jeff's Revelations, which we talked about in one of our interviews. Go watch that too. But all of the links are in the description. And is there anything else you guys want to add before we go?
No, just thanks so much for
being here.
having
Yeah.
us. It's always so fun to get to chat about these topics and raise a little bit more awareness for people. So we
Yes.
appreciate it.
Thank you. And thanks for the great questions.
Yeah, I feel like we barely scratched the surface. I'm sorry if I was like a little off tangent earlier, guys, but I feel like we got there. But there's so much more to say, so I guess we'll just say it on your channel.
Yeah,
All right.
hop on over.
We'll see you in a
Thanks
minute.
everyone for watching. Any last words, babe?
Follow your highest excitement, be conscious, and be well.
And be
Love
well. Thanks, babe.
it.
Amen.
Amen.
Bye.